Welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast, where we talk with the people behind the current events and breakthroughs in brain implants in an understandable way, helping bring together various fields involved in neuroprosthetics. Here is your host, Laden Neurotech.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Neural Implant Podcast. Today's guest is Eugene Daneshvar and Dr. Eugene Daneshvar. And we actually recorded an episode a year ago, and then I had troubles editing it or something like this, and then it was kind of stale. And then Eugene was like, "Oh, we should wait because I'm going to pass the bar exam and become a lawyer." And so we waited on that, and then there was another delay. And so Eugene, wow, this might be the longest that we've not just been planning it. Well, you might have even been planning it for 2 years or something like this. But man, good to have you on the show. Do you want to introduce yourself better than I just did?
I appreciate that. Boy, I've been so excited. I've been a longtime fan. Actually, I listened to your podcast when I'm at the gym. Gets my adrenaline going. And so I'm definitely honored to be a guest. Thank you so much for your patience as well for trying to set this up. I'm part of the community. So as far as my scientific background, I dual majored in electrical and biomedical engineering from University of Michigan, go Blue. I worked on a variety of projects, including design of MEMS-based neural interfaces for the motor cortex, deep brain. I worked on peripheral nerve conduits and electrodes made from thin film and photolithography, as well as retinal simulation electrodes. And I also crossed over into kind of smart materials or shape memory materials, sensors and actuators. And my doctoral work was based on making movable electrodes that would move either during implantation or after implantation. And I was inspired by these silicon electrodes that we would use that were so fragile and they would break during insertion. And sometimes it'd be inserted in the wrong location. And so I thought, why not be able to try to navigate to where you want it to go? And also, if you're familiar with the Michigan electrode technology, it's very planar and you have electrode sites just along a shank. Whereas the Utah electrode has electrode sites at the tip. My idea of implanting a planar electrode that would split off and turn from 2D to 3D, I thought was just an elegant, beautiful design. And I made it work. And then I wanted to spin that off and start my own kind of company. I wanted to be a little entrepreneur as well. That's when I learned all about the patent world and freedom to operate and what does that mean. And they don't teach you all this stuff in grad school. But I won a business competition. I joined multiple incubators. I also interned at Medtronic MiniMed, their diabetes division, and I helped develop algorithms with their insulin pumps. I had a breadth of experiences, and so in doing the science aspect, and so I thought that gave me confidence that I would be able to do the business aspect as well. But this issue about patents kept on coming up. So that's when I decided to, really try to understand that aspect as well and guide other scientists who also kind of know the science but wanted to figure out the business law aspect of translating the research. So during my legal training, I learned how to draft applications, take in invention disclosures, and the nuances that are important for making an enabling disclosure. It's really interesting aspects of what required for a patent. For a patent, you not only have to have patentable subject matter, it has to be new or novel, has to be non-obvious, and also has to be enabled. And as we were having our discussion earlier, I mentioned how important it is to be able to, for an inventor to be able to explain enough to the patent office to be able to get a grant of a patent in order for something to be enabled for someone else to be able to pick up after where they left off. In my legal training, I got really good at drafting applications. So then I got into litigation support. So this is still as a technical advisor, patent agent, and where I helped kind of either defend or attack different patents. That's a world of its own. That also helps draft better claims or better patents.
Yeah, so that's pretty crazy. I mean, basically went through school, became, did your PhD, which is a very long process, and you're like, I love this so much, I want to continue. You went to law school, went to even more school, and so now you're like 100 years old, and now only just, this year, last year, right? You started like your actual career where you're, making adult money, right? So yeah, I mean, you were so inspired by, this patent process, and then you wanted to combine both the legal and neurotech experience, and so now you're at a company doing that, right? Or that the
Yeah.
idea from the beginning?
No, no. So it's just my initial inspiration, I should have mentioned. First, my dad was a cardiologist, and I was always inspired on how electricity interacted with the heart and like electricity in the heart. And the second, some people noticed about me, I was born missing some fingers on one hand. That not only gave me real empathy for others who are like differently abled, but also constantly forced me to think about problems and solutions without the implicit bias we have. So, now when I walk into a room, I don't know if you guys are aware, but like whether all your handles are that are knobs that turn or whether they've got a handle, right? And it makes you think different once you have to think different. So that's what kind of inspired me to pursue both electrical and biomedical engineering. And I'm still passionate about pushing the boundaries of science and making, those scientific discoveries help actual people. And when I was doing the one thing I think has changed is that when I was doing my initial work, this idea of like the mom test, would you put this device in your mom? Like, is that how, do you really believe in that? And, it was really, as I'm getting older, it's turned into the me test when I put that in me. But I think being, having a, different ability has always inspired that translational aspect of any kind of science that I do or the people I work with. So there are people who are just, motivated by money and doing an IPO. I think I'm more interested in the scientists who really believe in their technology, really want to make that change. So I, work like hell for them.
Yeah, great. So okay, so tell us a little bit about what you do and why is, I don't know, patenting things important for people in the neurotech field?
So the patent types of things we can do, as I mentioned initially, we can work with an inventor, we can help them get a patent, but that's not where it ends. There's an aspect of our work where we work with technology transactions, which is licensing technology. That's its own art, and considering the difference between what is patentable, so whether or not someone's disclosure is enough to become a patent, that's different than what you need for a freedom to operate or FTO. And so being able, whether or not you have the freedom to do what you want to sell your product. And those are different. Sometimes these are conflated with my clients. And so one of the things that is important to do is understand the difference between you have a new idea and whether or not you can actually have all the different rights to sell the product ultimately, which might overlap with someone else's IP. So part of my work, I work with companies, and then other times I work with investors as well who want to do due diligence and whether or not, hey, is this company going to have problems, with litigation over infringing someone else's rights? I'm at Wilson Sonsini law firm, and everything I say today, represents my own views. But I've worked at several other law. I got trained in different great law firms as well. Reason I ended up at Wilson is we end up working with smaller clients like myself, who would have been like myself, who need that extra hand holding, need some extra guidance to avoid mistakes that happen further along. So we deal with the initial forming of companies. And there's a lot of issues about who owns that IP, what kind of hats you wear when you're working with other entities at a very young stage that can cause implications further along. So as far as the types of work that I do day in and day out, I do a lot of counseling of good patent strategy for what are the most important things for this venture to protect, given their possibly restricted funding. And the thing I really like about Wilson is that they're willing to take a risk on good entrepreneurs. So you may not be able to afford, You might not have the cash initially to do the good work of drafting a good application or the good contract. And depending on what the introduction is, who the team is, whether you have oversight or not, they're willing to give $25,000 to $50,000 worth of credit until you get your funding, which I think would have been so useful back in the day for myself, which I always thought I did bootstrap this myself. So I do like that they're willing to take the risk with the entrepreneur, and if the business fails, then we don't get paid. That's a risk we take. But otherwise, if it succeeds, or we actually have an incentive for you to succeed, you end up paying more premium rate. But at the same time, we might not be the best firm for a regular, let's say, automotive client who maybe it's a mechanical thing. We are usually in the life sciences aspect, which is like a lot more at stake. So anyways, that's where I found myself at this firm. Although I've worked at other great firms, I've worked at patent boutiques, and I've also was at an internship at Intuitive Surgical, where it was much higher level. And these are what you would consider a very big company that now looks to acquire other companies and other technologies, and like what are the considerations they look for from an in-house perspective. So I've had the benefit of being on different size entities and different perspectives, but I still feel like I'm a scientist at heart, and I always want to roll up my sleeves and get into clean room with my clients. But at least this way I can help move the science forward.
Yeah, I think that's a kind of a rare thing for a lawyer to have, is, like you said, clean room experience, a PhD in neuroscience and neurotech. So I think this is really cool. So what are some big mistakes that you see entrepreneurs doing? Maybe some horror stories. I mean, you don't have to say any names, but like, what's a big oof that you've seen happen?
Yeah, so I have to be careful here, not to reveal enough information for them to know I'm talking about them. But I think the general thing is, don't create your own prior art. Prior art is a term of art in the patent world, where if you first in academia, you can publish an article, and as soon as it becomes published, that is, and it's a different system. So each patent system of every country has their own set of rules, and they're somewhat aligned. But in the US, they allow like a 1 year grace period to be able to file for an application in the US if you hadn't filed for what's called the provisional application. That's not true, and that's not true in the rest of the world. So if you were to file for your idea or do a disclosure, and there's many different ways to do a disclosure. It's not just by print. You can even sell or offer to sell your invention that could create a prior art issue for you. And so I think that's one of the things that say we're always on the cutting edge, and we have a duty also to put out our information. But I think it'd be really wise to have an IP counsel in the loop, and also be upfront about anything that happens. So you do a prior art disclosure. That's not the end of the world. You just won't be in trouble. It just changes the strategy, because you can't these issues, the implications happen many years later. So once you want to sell something, or your company, and once you want to go IPO, like, somebody's going to do the due diligence, and the implication of what happened in the very first couple of months of even before the invention or during the invention. And there's also kind of patents overlaps with trade secrets as well. And people leave companies, and whether or not they take what's considered a trade secret of a company or not could be, and there's so many litigations in the news about that. There's some pretty famous ones. But I think the main thing I'll say is, don't undermine your valuation by not having an informed and intentional patent strategy. And you don't have to go cheap. A lot of people think you have to bootstrap, but if you work with certain law firms that are very entrepreneurial friendly, and my firm is not the only one, but I think that is a general statement, which is work with somebody who understands your business model. But then secondly, work with somebody who understands your technology as well. So the reason why not anybody can be a patent agent or patent attorney is because the whole idea is that you are the interface between the inventor and the government. And so you have to be able to understand their technology. And in our area, what is a person of ordinary skill in the art can change based on, how much background is expected. So I think as far as avoiding mistakes, don't publish or offer to sale without having IP counsel. And then, as far as picking the right IP counsel, there's, the whole list of things to talk about there. But I just think having somebody who understands what are the most important points for your innovation, like a person like myself who's been in the area, been in the art, if I have a client who is a lot of tunnel vision in their area, they're not aware of other innovations that have happened in the past or in a maybe adjacent area, which the patent office may consider is a similar field. And so it's better that we understand those nuances about what's different about each one of these now, so we can add those nuances in an application. Because once you file for something, you can't change it. It's gone. And it becomes prior art. So I can go on. There's a lot of things, but those are the things that I would say is the most kind of important topics. Aside from, I should also say, if you have employees or your employee-employer relationships, a lot of us are maybe wear more than one hat. So be aware of your obligations to each entity you're part of. So if you're part of a university, they have certain rules that they have over what they consider opportunities to moonlight or not, right? So whether or not they consider ownership over anything related to neuro in your field, or whether or not you can argue something is different enough. And so you might still have to disclose it to them, and then they may have to give you the approval to do it. So you have to understand those rules. Or if you're working with a company, they'll have their own regulations. So be aware of those. And a good patent attorney will ask that, like one of the first couple of questions they ask after they ask your name, that ask, what hat do you wear? Who am I talking to? Because it's really important to get those lines really clear in the beginning, because it only gets messy from there on.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think it's a really good point, and I am curious actually. So I was I guess having a debate with a friend of mine that he's like, I want a lawyer. I want a lawyer that, will fight for me, who's very aggressive, and yeah, a fighter. And I was saying, no, I think it'd be better to have a lawyer that knows your field. And I mean, who maybe they are a fighter as well, but more importantly, like they can cover your blind spots if you have any. So I mean, obviously you've argued, I guess, on my side. What's your opinion on that in your objective point of view?
I think that comes on to, on one hand, is integrity, and the question is, when does integrity matter? And there's, when you think about raising money, let's say, there's what's called, smart money and dumb money. Not insulting, but the idea is, do they understand the background of your area that they're investing in? And so an angel investor might be like, hey, I trust these guys. They seem to be really smart. And so I don't know technology, but I trust them, and I'm just going to give them money. You do send the pitch. I make the best neuro, whatever, make the best product. And then as time goes, as you grow up, as you try to go through Series A or Series B, there's going to be deer pockets who are going to do due diligence, and who are going to hire somebody like me, an expert in the area, to say, do they really have the rights? Is it really novel? What are the risks about freedom to operate? And by that time, years have gone on, you put so much investment in, and although a zealous lawyer initially might be able to say, oh yeah, you got a freedom to operate, just let's go, I'll rubber stamp it for you. Later on, we need follow-on funding, and this can determine whether or not you exist or not, and ultimately whether or not a patient or a person can be able to use your technology or not. Like, that's going to end up affecting the whole venture, possibly, right? So I think when it comes to having somebody that has both the zealousness and intellectual integrity, you can steer the ship much earlier, and that's what I'm passionate about doing. I believe in having both the zealousness and the integrity, because ultimately it's going to catch up with you sometime. And I think if at the end of the day, you want to be able to have freedom to sell your product or to get it to a person, you have to do things right early on because the implications will follow through. And we're in a really crowded space where a lot of our hardware ends up looking very similar to each other. Maybe it's just the signals that are changed, right? And as you've seen with Nevro and Boston Scientific, that the distinctions can be very, very subtle, but have huge implications. And having somebody who can understand that and argue that well, it is a really rare combination.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good point, and that's a interesting analysis. I've heard about smart money, dumb money for investors, but you can have smart legal and dumb legal too, I guess. And I mean, in your case, like your company invests in, the potentially can invest in the company in the startup. So that would also be smart money versus dumb money if they do give you like a line of credit or some kind,
Oh
some
yeah.
kind of credit or something like that. So that actually, I guess, does circle back to that. Okay, so I guess we should start and talk about too, like what's the process? Okay, let's say you're a grad student, you have some kind of idea, kind of like you did. I guess what was your pathway, and what should have you done now? I don't know, a decade out or something like this with perfect hindsight.
I'm actually planning to write a book about this. I've got the outline kind of drafted, and I'm happy to consult with our community here. Bring your situation. I'm happy to share more. A lot of these lessons I kind of mentioned thus far all apply to early on. So many things I wish I had known about the entity hat. Are you able to say this is my invention is mine, this company's mine, or as a grad student, did the university own it? Well, university has their own policies, but also university is subject to, if there's a federal grant that funded part of an idea, there's also certain obligations the university has towards the government as well. So I think that's one of the most important things I think I'd say is ownership of an idea. You get that clear, understand what the rules are about that. But there's a secondary aspect. So I also took a bunch of business classes, and one of the interesting things I learned is you have to have these multiple. It's like baking a cake. You need multiple different ingredients in, and if you miss one of them, if you miss the eggs, it's not going to turn out right. And so sometimes maybe pairing up with the entity, the university or the company might be able to help you get your idea. They might have the resources to help you, but what is their incentive for one application, one patent, one area when they have a portfolio of different things? So I wish they had invested more in the education process for entrepreneurs, or for scientists, entrepreneurs, that is. At least I hope things have gotten better, but nonetheless, I'm a resource for our community to help teach them about the fundamentals. Another thing I should mention about picking the right attorney, there's an analogy to medicine in terms of having the right background. There's general medicine, your primary care physician, then you have your specialist. And I think universities, they have certain outside counsel that they use that are on the cheaper end of things. They have regular relations with them. And I think this is an important nuance is if you end up being an entrepreneur that wants to commercialize a technology, do you use the university's IP person, or do you have a choice to identify a specialist that you'd want to work with and then ultimately assign to the university? But if you're going to end up paying for it, if you care about the quality, maybe it's important for you to be able to have a little bit more say in who helps you out. So I think that was another kind of important thing, because these ramifications of who drafts something, there's always these financial considerations, but also, as I mentioned, the implications of the quality of the output that matter. I think starting a company without prior business experience, you learn that there's different roles in terms of the labels, whether you're CEO or CTO. Understand what each of these roles do. I myself realized that I needed to build the right team and get the right board together. And then when that's when I realized, the legal aspects of things, I realized the value of that. And I didn't want to start something I couldn't finish successfully. So therefore I wanted to make sure I understood that I had all the different pieces together. And the university can help with building those teams, depends obviously on where you are. But they don't necessarily train you with that, and it'd be good to work with somebody who has some gray hair or lack of hair in my case, and be able to help avoid potential mistakes in forming your entity, what type of entity it is, what is your business model, what is your pathway through any kind of regulation that you may have. And again, they have, wherever your resources, if they have an incentive for you to succeed. And I think a firm like myself, we have an incentive when it comes to, if you want to do fundraising, and then we take a risk on whether you'll be able to pay us, like we have an incentive for you to succeed. Universities, if you're licensing their IP, well, they would be incentivized by the royalty rate, but how much incentivized are they, right? They've got a whole bunch of other things. But I think inventorship and authorship is always something that's always very, when I was a grad student, always wished that would be handled with at least more education. What does it take to be named as an author on academic paper is different than what is it to be considered an inventor. And inventorship is determined on a claim by claim basis of a patent. Thus, the inventorship of an application or a patent can change during examination of the claims, which during the life of a patent application could be modified or dropped. And the other aspect is if you're working with an entity outside of so if you're working, with another researcher in another university or another company, you have to understand that the ownership starts with the inventors, and then they end up might have obligations to assign at different places. So you get a lot of these situations where you have collaborations happen, and then multiple entities own the IP, and negotiations can get hairy, based on who understand, well, was their contribution really joint arrival of a definite permanent idea of the invention as it was going to be used in practice? Is that what happened? Or did I have the idea myself and then I reached out for a collaborator on it? And I think knowing that time frame of what happened is really important, and getting good guidance. I'm not trying to scare people in terms of here problems that are going to tank your whole venture. It's just important to get in front of it. I think prevention is really important. Much easier to prevent these problems with good guidance than trying to fix them after the fact.
Have you seen these kind of things, like deals get torpedoed, or like, oh, some amazing promising technology didn't go through because of legal issues, or what?
Yeah, unfortunately, I've seen all sorts of these problems. So I'm speaking personal experience as well, of either inventor not understanding their rights and obligations. And going through law school, you learn these different aspects of law that have implications on these early situations when it comes to property, intellectual property. It still is based off of these original ideas of what is a property and how do you transfer ownership from one entity to another entity. So there's a lot of implications and problems that happen, and this is where it happens. And this is when investors hire someone like myself to do the due diligence on not just the subject matter, but also the legal, what happened between these entities, what types of certain contracts are there for when times go wrong, right? So you have everything's going great initially, but when there's problems, then they turn to the letter of the contract. Like, what did we agree to when it came to royalty splitting? What is the definition of a sale? What is the field of use that we agree to? I've seen all these problems, and it just comes down to the imprecise language, and some of that is intentional. So some lawyers like it fuzzy because you can argue it, but some of it is just sloppy, and they hadn't really thought of this through. And so for my clients, I definitely, I might be overly zealous in terms of asking these questions, like that you understand there's a story behind each one of these that I try to help them avoid.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and we've been working together too. I think it's been interesting. You're kind of, yeah, maybe overzealous or like very, I don't know, protective or very defensive or something like this, which is what you want, your lawyer to be overly cautious maybe, but at the same time, you've seen some stuff, so that it
Well,
is
I
warranted.
tell you, I tell you what, I get referrals. All right, so people I've worked with refer me to other people, and I think there's a reason. I think my integrity. I think that what you'll see is that intellectual integrity for the science that I think I care a lot about, um, paired with the legal entity, which what I understand is required by the law. I think what you're experiencing is that I've seen it on the other end of being in litigation, being an expert witness, arguing about what happened when is what influences my direction now to my clients. And so I'm like, okay, if you're really in this game, and this is a game of kings. And one thing I'll mention, the difference between a patent agent you may hire versus a patent attorney you may hire is, it's between chess and checkers. And there's so many different topics that, and so many different strategies that come into play when if you're really getting into this idea that we have a new thing, new invention we want to protect it for 20 years. That's an investment. Not that's exciting. I'm excited to help people with that. It's also an investment. It's really expensive, and so I want my clients to understand. Hey, I'm building something valuable for you. Let's make sure all that value is captured in the application. If it's not, I'm putting your whole, not only it's not just your business, but it's what your motivations for your business is at risk. You wanted to translate this information, this idea to help a certain subset of the patient population. And those are the people I think about when I give this advice, because not just the business at risk, it's the opportunity for your idea to help those people that's at risk. So it's better for me to tell you about these horror stories now, get in front of it together. And I'm happy to say that I've got, several clients of mine who are raising millions of dollars now because I told them to wait on filing, like wait until you get this aspect, get this data, file on that. And now they have multiple follow-on applications pending based off the information that they added to the application.
Yeah, that's incredible. Yeah, no, I think for listeners too, I've enjoyed working with you. It's fresh, just a few weeks, I guess, but still, it's been good. So, Eugene, as we're finishing up, is there anything that you want listeners to come away with? Is there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to mention?
There's a lot of education that I've done in terms of learning from life experience, working in incubators, working with bigger companies and smaller companies, and I'd say feel free to do a consultation with me, get a second opinion with me. I'm happy to help educate. I might not, because of conflicts, I might not be able to represent everybody who reaches out, but at least I'm willing to have, a second pair of eyes on anything that's already published. So here's my published application. What do you think? And I'm happy to talk about what are some of the strategic ideas of forming a portfolio of different types of protecting your invention. So even design patents is a way that might be useful for a particular company. And I think seeing the holistic idea of at the end of the road, you want to create a whole asset structure that captures as much as you can. And versus if you want to make things cheap initially and work with, well, which I was once a patent agent, but I was a little different. I had litigation experience as a patent agent. And I think a lot of people go on the cheap on things without thinking about the implications for the larger strategy. And I'm saying, work with people I'm happy to educate people on the process because we're in this community. If you're listening to this podcast, that means you're in my community and I want you to have the best outcome. So feel free to reach out.
Yeah, great. Eugene, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of wisdom, experience. Yeah, I've enjoyed it.
Thanks a lot, Ann. Pleasure.
Hope you enjoyed the show and were able to learn something new, bringing together different fields in novel ways. Until next time on the Neural Implant Podcast.